mentioned this a little bit in my coffee and cauldrons video, but I feel like I need to expand upon it a bit. The idea that I want a little more spirituality flooding into my relationships and friendships. And I realized this after watching a video from lovely Barefoot Taurus and talking about authenticity and feeling that weird pull with relationships that you have, right? Like, and it is true how there are certain things now that are exhausting to me that weren't before. The conversations about certain topics that I used to very much enjoy. Fashion, how things are happening, design-wise. Like, if there's not a, like, kind of a spiritual element to any of those things, it kind of grates on me a bit, where I'm like, I'm not as interested in that. And part of it is, could you just be my total brain deciding, no, I'd rather talk about the witchcraft. This is my interest. This is what I'm giving all my time in. This is what flips my switch, I guess. And so why would I want to do anything that flips it the other way? I'm like, no, I'm not interested in that. But I am starting to really, really want more deep spiritual friendships. And that is a lot in just the fact that I am not giving as much credence to those who don't explore spirituality. I've had really good friends who are awesome, but they don't really like look into that stuff, or they're very firmly in the atheist camp. And it's not so much that I am like discontinuing them as friends. That's not happening. But what I am doing is I'm giving a lot more time, and I'm catching up with and checking in on friends of mine who I know are spiritual a lot more. I'm also, you know, and I think part of that came from just talking to people and exploring stuff on YouTube, because I realized that having discussions with everyone in the comments and like commenting on other channels and watching other videos and participating in lives and stuff, I felt very connected. It was a very like, oh, fine, like, oh, that feeling you find when you're like finally other people who are exploring and just interested in this weird mumbo jumbo energetic crap that I'm into. Like, this is fantastic that I can really talk in earnest about this topic all the time. And so that is a really great feeling, and I really enjoy it online, and I really, you know, I want more of it in my mundane life as well. I go down to the metaphysical shop here in Phoenix a lot more. I like discussing things in a more spiritual context. I like looking at the spiritual context of almost anything I have to deal with in life now a lot. Like, it's getting to the point where it's like I can tell that if someone isn't as interested in spirituality as I am, they're like, really, we're still talking about this? How did you turn this topic into now something about your spirituality and witchcraft? Like, how did you do that? But I love finding that spiritual layer, because for me it does. It bleeds into every part of my life. It bleeds into all little sections of how I am curating and operating in this reality now. So I want more people who think like that. I love discussing things here. I love when other people comment and tell me their stories in the comments about how they're dealing with stuff, and like, yeah, no, that came up for me and I'm having to deal with this, or like, you know, witch fails. Or it's hard to talk with friends of mine who aren't curious in spirituality when I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I pulled a daily draw today and I pulled the tower and now I'm terrified something's gonna come crashing down today. Like, how do you express that with someone who doesn't know what you're talking about? Or they're like, it's just a silly card, like, get over it. You're like, it is, but it's a sign, it's a sign. And the idea of seeing signs everywhere. It's funny how I was talking to my sister the other day, and she was very, very frustrated in doing all these things all at once, all while Mercury was in retrograde. And while I don't believe you have to like stop your life and do things when things are in retrograde, definitely not, like, keep chugging along, but, you know, double check your stuff, double check stuff. And she wasn't double checking anything. I was like, just double check stuff and you'll be fine. And I said to her, and I was just like, just double check stuff. And she's like, why do you keep saying double check stuff? I'm like, because Mercury's in retrograde, and if you don't double check stuff, the energy's gonna fuck with you. Like, just do it. And so she kind of laughed, like, I think got a little irritated with me, because I know she was just trying to vent. And like, being a better sister, I should have just listened and listened to her vent. Like, that's what I should have done. But part of me was like, well, yeah, retrograde, like, we know. And it's funny how I got so used to, you know, talking to people on Instagram or talking to people through here in the messages and stuff about, yeah, no, shit's in retrograde. Like, no, I got you. I feel you. Like, we can get through this. And the stuff is coming out of retrograde now, and those shifts are happening and things are a little fluxy. I'm feeling into that energy. When the moon is full, when it's a new moon, I can definitely feel that energy, and people are playing with that. Knowing that I'm not the only person feeling those weird shifts and thinking about things constantly magically and spiritually, like, it makes me feel better, right? And I'm way more interested in curating way more friendships and relationships under that gaze, under that veil or framework, I guess. Like, I love discussing things that are of spiritual nature. And so, I don't know, it's kind of I feel a little weird because I'm like, I shouldn't be, I feel at some points I am devaluing my friendships that aren't spiritual, or I am possibly getting in the level of like a little bit of that spiritual bypassing and feeling like, well, I'm spiritual, so I'm above this, I'm above talking of this menial nonsense. I need to check myself on that real quick, because that is not cool. Because the mundane stuff does still matter, and their interests are still perfectly fine if they are not interested in things of a spiritual sense. It's just not what I'm interested in, which is kind of hard when you're like, well, now we're having less and less in common because so much of my life is becoming into the spiritual stuff. And I want relationships that reflect that. And I think I've also kind of realized, in a sense, that that even is definitely going to go down to dating. I used to not really care much about what the guys I saw believed in as a whole, just because I felt that spirituality was so private and personal, and it really truly is. But I'm starting to realize that maybe under my, you know, perfect framework of like, when I think of like what a great relationship would be, I always knew it's like, I need someone who has a creative mindset. Even if they aren't in the creative field of work, they have to understand that relation that artists have with their work. You know, I'd be interested to talk, you know, someone who is politically somewhat aligned with me, you know, don't have to agree with on everything, but you know, some things like, okay, we believe that gay people should be able to marry. Like, that's just normal common sense, human right, decency, right? Like, there's things like that where it's kind of like easy non-negotiables. But now I realize that no, actually I think that spirituality might be one of those odd non-negotiables that I have, because I really love discussing this stuff, and I don't know if I could be with a partner all that long term if I didn't. I remember the only long-term relationship I've ever had, we did discuss spirituality a little bit here and there, and specifically talking about the lack of malleability in spirituality and how that's a problem. We never really got too in depth with anything though, and it's funny how if I really look back on a lot of different relationships, when things are lacking, when I'm really missing like a really fulfilling relationship, it has to do with that. And a lot of times when relationships, friendships in general, are kind of based off that spiritual bond, I feel they're really deep and connected, even if we haven't known each other that long. I have one friend who, I love her to absolute death, and she's just like this wonderful little country bounding hippie that just is like bouncing all over the place. She was in a van for like the last 7 months traveling around the country with a bunch of other people. Like, she's just, I love her. Lives a little nomadic lifestyle that I could never do because I need my grounded in my place. But me and her really hooked up quite easily because of the fact that we connected immediately on a spiritual level. She was so open with her spirituality and exploring it and exploring these things, and I was like, oh my god, awesome, I could do this too. You know, we took meditation classes together in college, and we took a bunch of other these, you know, and it was for us always a little more of the energetic woo mindset as opposed to just learning how to calm our brains and how to, you know, focus better on our schoolwork or whatever. And I want to, I don't know, lean more into them, I guess, while also not entirely casting out the people who don't discuss spirituality or aren't of that mindset. But I feel like it's a big importance, and leaving room for the people who also believe that way or think that way to have a more realm of significance in my life. I don't think it's wrong. I think that's a good thing to do. And in fact, it might be why a lot of times with certain relationships, I feel something missing, or I feel a little bit off or misunderstood in some senses, where I realize I've never felt that with even friends I haven't known that long, as long as we were kind of doing a relationship based off a spiritual basis. And it's funny too, because it's not even about agreeing on spirituality, right? Like, I always found it very interesting. One of my friends back in high school was of a bit more of a Christian mindset, but we talked about purpose and universe and fate and whether or not that was like those discussions were so integral. And like, she knew that I wasn't deeply Christian or anything at the time. It was very much like, I don't freaking know what I believe in, which I still am, just now under the witchcraft fun thing. But like those, like, we had such a really great friendship, and it's funny because I don't even know what's like what happened with her. We never really kept up that much because outside of that we never really talked. But if I look back on, you know, high school in that sense, like that was kind of like the fun stuff that I really enjoyed. So I don't know, comment down below, how do you guys feel about relationships with people who aren't as spiritual as you versus making friendships with people who are way more spiritual? Do you find a deeper connection? Is that something that you're like, yes? Or, you know, does it not really matter? You're like, no, I have friends who are a mix of both, because I'm finding a mix of both, but I'm wanting definitely more to lean a little more towards the spiritual friends now. Anyway, I make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.